everyone. I'll just wait for a few more people to come in. In fact, I will invite Lewis in now because he had some problems with earphones earlier. Hello, I'm Nicole, and today I'm currently in a beautiful little mountain town called Bansko. Oh, hey.
I honestly
No,
don't
it's
know why it's done that.
fine.
I could hear you, and as soon as I joined, it went off again.
So yeah,
Just
I'm
give me a
in
sec.
Bansko at the moment.
Hey, Ann.
Oh no. Well, hi Lewis, hi.
I think I can wait. Say something. I don't know if I can hear you yet. Yes. Great success.
Hi Lewis.
Yeah.
Yay.
No. It's why
Yes.
I'm really
I thought
selling
it was
myself
gonna take
well as like a
ages, so I
CTO
thought
here.
that,
It's like, yeah, my
um,
fucking headphones don't work. That's it. Yeah. I'm not gonna name and shame the
oh, the
brand
lead tech
because,
guy.
but yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I was just asking. Well, I was just asking where everyone's based. So, where are you based right now? Let us know in the comments below. As I said, I'm in Bansko at the moment, which is beautiful, but just very rainy and kind of grey at the moment. And just before we get into the chat with my friend Lewis, I just want to highlight that a few weeks ago, Nexstand came out with their newest launch, which is the K1 laptop stand, which is the world's first carbon fiber laptop stand, which means it's super durable, which means it's super, super useful to stuff into your suitcase. Because as I mentioned last time, I need to pack so much into mine. So, I mean, it's perfect for that.
Hello.
So today I'm chatting with Lewis, who is based in, well, hey, Lewis is CTO and co-founder of SonX app, but I will let him explain
I'm good.
all of that
Yeah,
to
I'm
you.
fantastic.
And so
I'm
just first, hi Lewis,
I'm
how are
currently in
you?
Mallorca, which is beautiful. I've been here about nearly 4 weeks, but then I'm heading back to Mexico at the weekend. Yeah, so she
Nice.
came over for
And
a
you said
couple of
that your
weeks. I kind of had
girlfriend's
2
already
weeks
got
like
back to Mexico.
holiday-ish, so I was kind of like staying in touch days or whatever with the team, but I was kind of not working so much. I know that Riyadh has joined the live, so apologies for those 2 weeks, mate. He's our head of design, he's amazing. But yeah, so my girlfriend came over for those 2 weeks, and we were kind of like sightseeing and having fun, and then she went back to Mexico. I've been here for the last 2 weeks, just kind of finishing some stuff up and working. But yeah, as you can see, it's kind of not too far to the beach. I've been.
Nice. How are you? Do you kind of prefer between like Playa del
Different,
Carmen and
like
Mallorca? Which one
it's
kind of tickles
Playa
your
del
scales
Carmen
for
is
you?
very, like, for anyone that hasn't been there, it's in Mexico. It's kind of like an hour down from Cancun, and it's very kind of, it's very young. There's lots of like restaurants and bars. It's and it's right on the beach. And I think a lot of places in Mexico that are beachy are kind of like touristy. You can't really live there because it's all just hotels on the beach. But Playa del Carmen is just a town right on the beach, and you can live like a couple of blocks on the beach very easily. So yeah, that's fun. Mallorca is a lot more kind of, it's a holiday and retirement place. So it's not quite as, I'm not sure how long I could live here without getting bored, but to come for yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know, Palma, the capital is probably different. That's actually a very
Really?
big city, but to come for a few weeks is great, but I think I'm kind of reaching that limit now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Bansko. Like 2 weeks,
That's
it's
it.
like
That's
nice
it.
and refreshing, and then kind of need to get back to something a bit busier. Yeah, I think someone
Do you
just
know what?
commented
It's
your
up
office
there.
looks
Yeah.
very good right
I'm
now,
actually in a
Lewis.
bunker somewhere in like
Is this
Harlow.
green
No,
screen?
it's not. Look, it's lovely. We were very lucky to get a really great apartment right on the beach. We're in a little town called El Toro, which is called that because I don't know if you can see like the headland like that. You've been to El Toro, so there's like a
I've
marina
been
which kind
there.
of ruined it, but there's two bits of headlands that are kind of
Yeah,
like
I've been
that,
there.
and it's supposed to be like, because El Toro means the bull, and it's supposed to be like the horns.
Yeah.
Nothing beats Watford, lads. Yeah, mate, Fred, you're right. I'm loving it. Fred's getting very involved in the comments and loving it.
Oh yeah.
More.
Well, we love it, so more. Okay, so just for everyone watching right now and everyone who will be watching later, can you explain
Yeah,
to
sure. So,
our
I
audience
mean,
what
it started,
is?
my co-founder Lee, so he's the CEO, and he kind of came up with this idea. He realized during the, the lockdowns that like artists, musicians were kind of just getting screwed, right? Like this, for a long time actually, but the pandemic really put it into focus. Like their revenue sources have just kind of dried up. Right, first you had, piracy and Napster and all of that kind of stuff, which is very well documented. I don't think I need to dig into that too much. But, obviously the pandemic, then, they weren't able to tour. So like, because all of that revenue that they were getting from music, they kind of put into touring, and ticket prices went up, and, and then that dried up, and they're like, hang on a minute, like I don't have any money. And what Lee realized was that they don't really monetize musicians. They don't really monetize their content beyond the music itself. Everything else is like a loss leader to push people into Spotify, Apple Music, what have you. But that content that they spend so much time making to do that marketing content, it isn't monetized at all. And there's actually not very many industries that work that way. And that was, to Lee, someone who's come from kind of, well, he was working on kind of influencer stuff at the time, and he's come from a non-music talent management background. Like that was a very weird proposal. So he was like, well, what if we made something that did that? But Lee isn't techie, right? And me and Lee, we worked together at Sony Music, but I'd actually handed my notice in, and I was working my notice period. I was going to go freelance. And he came to me and was like, hey, I've got this idea. And I was like, that's very cool. He was very artist focused, but I was like, well, it would need to work for the fans. Like, what's the value proposition for the fans? Because for me, it's always been really, really weird the way the music industry treats super fans, particularly, right? So, super fans are the kind of hyper engaged ones. They get in early, they stay a long time, they buy all the, the merchandise, the tickets, all the rest of it. And they don't get treated any differently from other fans, which to me, that's been really weird, especially if you look at the way that they behave, right? So, as I said, they typically will get in early, right? They'll tell all their friends about this great new artist that they found. They'll go to all the early shows. There'll only be like 20 people there, and they'll keep, the ticket stub. They'll keep the wristband. They'll keep like a drumstick that the drummer's thrown out. Like all these little kind of trinkets, right? And they have like a cork board or a drawer, like something in their bedroom or somewhere in their house. And they'll tell everyone that comes around, oh, this is when I went to that show, and look at this. And you have these people with these incredible collections of like ticket stubs dating back to like the 70s. And all that. There's nothing online that lets you do that. Absolutely nothing. And that to me has always been fucking weird. It's super weird. So I was like, well, if we could, and the reason that there isn't is because artists don't know who these fans are, right? Like just because you've got that ticket stub, the artist doesn't know that. So there's no way to join the dots. So, I said to Lee, I was like, this is great for artists. I said, but what if we made it that platform for fans where where fans can prove their fandom and artists can see that and reward them for it? It kind of closing that loop, right?
Yeah, I saw I was on your website earlier, and I saw that it's actually is it this month that you've launched as well? Because I saw that
we did. We finished the build and we launched. I think it's 3 weeks ago now, thereabouts. It might be slightly longer, it might be 4 now. Losing track of time, clearly. But yeah, so we're in both of the app stores. If you search for SonX, SonX, in either Google or Apple App Store, and we're in there. We have 5 artists on board at the moment. There's more coming on shortly. And basically how it works, what the experience is you log in, you create an account and log in, and you pick an artist or several artists that you're interested in, and you sign up to their community on SonX. And it's paid subscriptions. So and they're very low. There's a few tiers. There's a free tier, which is kind of just previews of the content that the artists share. And then there's $1.99 a month, which is kind of most of the content. Some stuff is reserved for the higher tier, but most of it. And then there's the $3.99 a month tier, that's our higher tier. And that gets you all of the artist content and the early access and all the rest of it. So, and those fees are like per artist. So you're paying that artist directly, which I think is one of the things with Spotify that people don't really realize is you pay this £10 a month, right? And you listen to everything. But what you like artists, well, no, I mean, no, it doesn't work like that. But like artists aren't paid based on your listening. There's like a pool is created. And then based on the total number of listens that artist gets, that they get that percentage of the pool. It's kind of a much more convoluted system. So we were like, screw that, just pay the artist directly. So you pay this monthly fee, you get access to exclusive content. So that can be anything from, photos and videos, voice notes, which is something we're kind of really focused on. I think it's a great way to kind of feel a lot closer to the artist. They can just, like it's like a kind of like a WhatsApp almost, right?
Oh, that's really cool.
Live audio rooms, so something like this, but without the video thing, like Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse, so an artist can start a live audio and everyone can jump in. And then there's tickets and products as well, so merchandise products, but it's all exclusive. It's stuff that for the tickets, it's either early access or only available on SonX. For the products, they're only available on SonX, and for the content, it's only available on SonX. So this is for the real lean-in fans, the ones that really, really care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can see that they can like enter like
Yeah, I
not
mean,
raffles, but they have like chances to
it's a
win
little bit
tickets as
different to
well
a
and
kind
things
of
like that
competition
too.
as you think of it normally. They are rewards, right? So what happens is every time a fan buys, you know, a ticket or a piece of merchandise, or like, you know, reaches a certain level of interaction with the artist, they get rewarded with the digital collectibles, and that, you know, that's free. It's just something they kind of get, you know, put into their account for them, and they can show it on their profile. And that kind of, you know, coming back to that thing I said about the collectible kind of, you know, stuff that people do, the ticket stubs and all the rest of it in real life, it kind of does that. It lets them show that off. But they have like different rarities attached to them, right? So the more difficult it is to get this thing, the rarer it is, right? So if I'm selling a t-shirt, the first person to buy it will get this like one of one unique thing, whereas the next 10 will each get like a different rarity, and the next 100, you know, so on and so forth. So what that does is it lets them get those bragging rights, but it lets the artist actually look out into their community and say, okay, well, who's paying attention, right? Who's got the most one-of-ones or the most rare collectibles, or like who got that, you know, who got the first edition from that t-shirt that I sold 5 years ago or whatever, right? So, you know, then the artists are able to pick out these kind of quality relationships, and they can actually put rewards into these collectibles, and that could be a free ticket, it could be something physical like a meet and greet, sit down for a coffee, it could be something really small like a discount off of you know, one of their products on SonX. It could be kind of anything, but that collectible becomes the means through which they redeem that reward.
That's really cool. And so when an artist, say an artist signs with you, does that mean that your platform gets kind of their first release
Yes
of
and no.
music
It's up
first
to the
as well?
artist.
So you
Now,
get like
you know,
some
music
exclusive
rights
things
is a
like that?
really, really complex area, right? You know, master rights are kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And, you know, we didn't want to get too far into the weeds with that, because actually that's not really what we're doing. Like, that's already kind of been solved. You know, you can go on Spotify, you can go on Apple Music, or, you know, you can buy the vinyl. There's, you know, you have these options, right? You know, we were looking at everything else. That said, if an artist has tracks that are not kind of, you know, involved in a record label deal, they can still put those on SonX if they own them themselves. If they have the permission to do that, then they can do that. But anytime they're going to upload audio, because they might be uploading a voice note, right? We don't know until they've uploaded it. So anytime they go to upload audio, there's a note saying like, hey, you know, if you don't own the rights to this, don't upload it. But yeah, that said, you know, we have two of the artists that are on there at the moment are sharing tracks on there. For example, we've got an artist called Sergio, and he's based in New York or Miami, and he's you know, he's got a deal, and he has tracks released under that deal. But then there are Spanish versions of those tracks that are not subject to that deal, and those are on SonX.
Nice, nice. So that's really cool. I really love the idea of the voice notes though as well, because that kind of makes this really personal connection between the fans and the musicians. It's something that, yes, you can get it from like, I guess, Instagrams when people do lives and when they do reels, but having that as just
Yeah, I agree. I
community is
think,
very
you know, it also
exclusive,
breaks
and
down
I
a lot
like
of
that
barriers for the
also.
artists for content creation, because I mean, look at this, right? So we're, you know, we're sitting here on video, right? You know, we both kind of tarted ourselves up and made ourselves look pretty. There's an amount of planning that goes into that. No, I
I
I
taught
did. I
myself
mean,
up, Lewis.
but no, look, there's an amount of planning that goes into, you know, a photo shoot, live video, you know, any kind of like visual medium, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with audio, like you could be laying in bed, right? It doesn't matter, right? And I think this is something else that we learned during the pandemic, right? It's like people working from home. It's like, if I don't have to turn my camera on, I'm not getting out of bed, right? Do you know what I mean? But it's that whole point, because, you know, making it that accessible for the artist to create content means they're not blocked by anything. You know, budget, time, location, none of these things matter. They could be in a cab, they could be in bed, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, unfiltered. Yeah, no, love that. And so let's go like back a bit as well, because I started off a little bit backwards. Tell me a bit about your journey from, because this wasn't what you always did. So tell me about your journey from going from huge corporate company like Sony to starting your own business with your partner.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's
on
kind
the
of, it
entrepreneurial
didn't
path.
exactly happen like that. I was leaving anyway. I was at Sony for 5 years. I had a great time. I think, you know, look, they're a music company. They're not necessarily a tech company. So I think I'd reached the limit of where I could get to. I got some great experience, met some great people. but I decided it was time to move on. And it was like during the pandemic, I kind of traveled to Mexico and then decided kind of that I didn't really want to come back. And I think that was a kind of a, an issue for them as well, which is fair enough. They're an office-based business. When they opened the office again, it was kind of, so that's when I made the decision to leave. But then while I was working my notice period, as I said, Lee got in touch with me about SonX, and it was kind of, it just fed into a lot of things that I had kind of, already identified or had biases towards, I guess, or whatever of, I saw it as an opportunity for the fan experience. So that was, but yeah, it was a huge, huge change to go from this super kind of, structured, well-placed, corporate environment to, jumping into startup land where you kind of fly by the seat of your pants for the first, at least the first year, if not longer. And I think, in some ways we still are. I think we've gotten a lot more organized over the last 12 months, but it was a real kind of change of pace. But it was the kind of opportunity that I was looking for. I think, it's not like, that's it basically.
Yeah. Do you find that your years in corporate life though taught you
Yeah,
gave you some
definitely. I
really good
think,
lessons
look,
to
it's
then
not
take
crucial for
into
someone to do that if they want to, go and start a startup. It's not like you have to do corporate first. Like it depends on the person. Like, I mean, I already had a music industry network before I started at Sony. Like when I was at Sony, in fact, like I kept seeing people that I knew, right, either that were already working there or like guests coming in and things like that. So that happened a lot. But it did teach me. Do you know what it really taught me is like where to deploy energy and focus, because it's very easy. When there's a lot of things to do, it's very easy to get wrapped up in the thing that's easy or the thing that interests you the most, but that might not be the most impactful thing, So it was a pretty fast-paced environment, and so it taught me how to prioritize and figure that out like really, really well, and also how to lean on my network, right? I was saying like I kind of already had it, but when you have like a company of that scale, it shows you how useful it can be to collaborate with other people and kind of and bring them into what you're doing. I think like before I was at Sony, I was always kind of a bit like, I don't know about like lone wolf, but I had like a lot of my own ventures and did a lot of things like solo, and it was I enjoyed that. It was a great challenge, but I think you don't really, it's very difficult to get anywhere that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like that's definitely something that I think a lot of people in startups struggle with is when they're starting their own business, they feel like they want to have control over everything, and they want to, because they're perfectionists and they want to kind of control everything, and they feel like it's on them, their responsibility. But actually, you're like obviously right, having a network of people around you to delegate and to rely on, and to sort of rely on them for that
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
way
And
more
that might not
effective
sound like
than
something
being a
that's useful
one-man
in
band.
startup land, because, when you start up, resources are kind of lean, right? But I think those two things combined is actually really useful, because it helps you to govern like, okay, what should we build? What should we do in-house? What should we hire for? And actually, what should we outsource or look for a partner for, or, whatever. So like those decisions, I think would have been a lot more difficult without that time pre-Sony kind of building that network and then being there and being able to kind of use it. I think that was super, super interesting.
Do you find because I'm guessing SonX
So,
team is kind of
I mean,
split up over the world, right?
it's
Is it
predominantly
UK
UK
based?
based. So we've got Lee, who's the founder. He's based in London. Riyadh, who's our head of design, is also based in London, although he's traveling at the moment. I think he's in Boston at the moment. And then me, I'm a bit wayward. But we've had team members in
Bit of a lone wolf.
Barcelona. We've had team members in South Africa. We've had other team members in Mexico. We've had contractors in the US. We've had contractors in Eastern Europe, actually all parts of Europe. At one point, we had contractors in Asia, although the time zone difference, I was in Mexico and they were technical contractors. That just did not work out because it was too big of a time difference. But yeah, we're pretty distributed, but I think the goal going forward is to kind of like hone that down to kind of 2 time zones, right? Which is like London and New York. But yeah, so it's kind of, we kind of threw the net wide and now we're like refocusing.
Yeah. Do you find so going back to that then, do you find that with remote work there obviously are some challenges like the time zones, and are there things that you prefer about
Yeah,
being in person or
look,
things
you
that you
know,
prefer? What's the pros and
there's
cons?
there's definitely challenges. I think on balance it works out for me. Again, it depends on the person. I remember again at Sony, like when the office closed, there were like a load of people that were like, we don't want to go back, and there were a load of people that were like, oh my god, we really miss the office. So it really depends on the person, the role, the team. I think the biggest challenge is I've already mentioned time zone, and it is, it is a real thing. I mean, Mexico is 5 or 6 hours behind London, depending on what time of the year it is, because London puts their clocks forward and back and Mexico doesn't. So that's really difficult. I always feel like I'm late for work, right? Like every day, like being here has been a dream. I'm an hour ahead of London. I'm like, I can go swimming, I can go to the shop and make a breakfast and have a shower and get dressed, and it's that they haven't even started yet. It's great. But yeah, like that's challenging. Like there's a lot of kind of 5 a.m. alarms and things like that. That does make it very, very difficult. It's easy once or twice, but every day, like that's a real challenge. Like, and having consistency at doing that, like getting up, being on a call at 5 a.m. every single day, like that's very difficult to do. Very difficult to sustain. So time zones are a difficult thing. The other thing as well is, when you're in an office, you have these kind of, or not even in an office, but like if you're having regular FaceTime, right? These kind of like chance conversations where you just kind of walk past each other in the hall or something and just like spitball about but even like some random thought that's in your head that might spot the other person off into an idea, and like that doesn't happen when you're at home. So it's, we're very careful to try and kind of separate like operational calls, like daily stand-ups, and then having deliberate brainstorming sessions, because I think when you don't have the environment where people can just pass each other in the hall and spark a brainstorming session, I think the tendency is for creative members of staff to want brainstorms all the time because they're not getting that, and that's fair enough because they're missing out on it, and that's a part of their process. And then that can frustrate other parts of the team. So it's very difficult to kind of wrangle that. But I think as long as you're making a clear marker between like making time for creativity is hugely important, and then setting that apart from your operational calls so that they don't disrupt one another, I think is a good way to solve that.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of finding interesting things online, creative little things, and then just like bombarding my boss.
It's like there's always that friend that sends you memes in your Instagram inbox, and you're just like, oh, so and so sent you a reel, and you're just like, I'm not reading that. Like it depends on like who you are as a person, but like if I'm working and I see like so and so sent you a reel, I'm like, it depends who sent it. If it's like a colleague or someone that I talk business with, I'm like, okay, let me check this out. If it's like that friend that's always sending memes, I'm like, I'm ignoring you. I'm not reading that right now. I'll do that on Saturday morning when yeah. Yeah, cool.
You just like it without even you don't even watch it. You just
I sound like a real dick, don't I?
Yeah, really funny.
Yeah. Anyway.
So moving on with sort of technology then, obviously I'm sure you must not be a stranger to the world of AI at the moment, and sort of how people are
it's nonsense, isn't it? It's complete nonsense.
Musicians. Do you have any opinions on that?
Look, no one can predict the future, right? But I think a lot of the fears seem very unfounded at the moment based on current evidence. I think a lot of it is based on, but it might. And it's like, well, yes, it might. But I mean, anything might happen. Do you know what I mean? Like while we're on this Instagram Live, a comment might come and land on my head. Do you know what I mean? Like anything might, worrying about it is stupid. I think the thing that people don't realize as well is that like your favorite DJs, producers, and like songwriters that work with your favorite artists, they've been using AI for years, right? Beat matching, that's AI. Actually, accompaniment writing, and this is the other thing, and actually I think this is a really good use for AI in music, where it's like, let's say I'm a solo artist and I've got like a hook melody in my head and some lyrics, and I'm like, right, I'm struggling to develop this song, right? What you'd normally do is say, okay, let's throw them in a room with 20 songwriters and throw shit at the wall and see what sticks. But like that isn't useful, right? It's sometimes works, but it isn't like it doesn't always, and it's a lot of resources. You've got to pay those 20 songwriters, right? So, and then you have to give, whoever's actually, putting something pen to paper, like you've got to give them points on the deal or pay them off or buy them out. So it's like, that's a really inefficient use of resources. So accompaniment writing in AI is where you can just feed it like, okay, I've got this melody, these lyrics, this is the kind of style I'm going for. Give me drums, or give me bass, or like, give me the verse melody. Here's the chorus, right? And these things actually, like, they're used for kind of rapid prototyping. I don't think there's any artists that are actually doing that and then saying, oh, the song's finished. They don't do that. They'll then take the output and take it back to the drawing board. But it just helps them rapidly prototype. It's the same, in tech. Like if you're building like a dashboard, an analytics dashboard, right? You're not going to build that from scratch. You'll use like some CSS framework like Bootstrap or something, and it'll look really boring, but it'll work, right? And then in your iteration, you'll evolve that product. And it's the same thing for songwriting, right? You're going to take whatever the rapid prototyping solution is, you'll take that and then iterate it and arrive at a final product. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. The irony of it is, of course, like the people that are being most vocal about these fears are the major labels. But the irony of all of this is that they started it. The first ever AI generated song was, was it called? It was called Daddy's Car, right? So basically Sony, Daddy's Car. So, and it was in 2016. So Sony CSL, which is Sony Computer Science Labs, they had an AI that could write melodies, right? And they fed it the entire back catalogue of the Beatles, and it spat out a melody. And then they got a French songwriter to write the lyrics and record the tune. Right. So they started it, and now they're like, oh, this is terrible. People are, this is going to ruin creativity. It's like, well, you fucking started it. What are you talking about? But it's nonsense. It won't ruin creativity.
Yeah. I completely, you're right. I think I definitely heard of that. I definitely remember like some news about someone feeding the Beatles catalogue. No, you're so right. And also like, I think it's kind of the same for like writing, like blog writing and writing fiction and stuff as well. Like, I think people forget that, we take inspiration from other artists and from other writers to begin with. So not many people.
No, it's impossible.
It's hard to get a truly original, completely.
Everyone is influenced by everything. And all AI does is speed up the process. And that's the interesting thing, because you have, the rights holders, the reason they're being so vocal about this, especially the big three, Warner, Universal, Sony, the reason they're being so vocal about it, and I do understand it, but like, I understand both sides of the argument, but the reason they're really kind of getting their knickers in a twist about it is like, oh, well, if you recently there was someone did like a fake Drake song, right? Where it's like they trained an AI model on Drake's lyrics and voice and style and all the rest of it and said, okay, make a song. And it sounded exactly like Drake, and they put it on Spotify under a different name, and Spotify eventually took it down. And, the reason they're getting their knickers in a twist about it is like Drake, I think, is signed to Universal. I'm not sure it's either Universal or Warner, but anyway. So, his rights holder would be saying, well, you have trained your AI on our copyright material, and now you're monetizing the output, so we're due a cut. And like, actually, that makes sense. That does make sense. But then at the same time, well, how many indie bands were influenced by the Beatles, right? Do all of those owe, I mean, who is it now? Sony, I think, owns a large part of that catalog. Do they owe Sony money because they listen to the Beatles a lot? No, like, that's ridiculous. So like, the question then is, where do you draw the line? I don't have an answer for that, but it's definitely an interesting argument. But I think for me, like, it's the least interesting part of AI in music. I don't find that particularly interesting. I think, what's much more interesting for me, I mean, recommendations, I think, that's, obviously that's not new, but it's still very interesting. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in recommendations, especially for music, because it's such a subjective thing. Causality of marketing as well. This is a big one. And this is, if you ask anyone that works in digital marketing at a record label, they'll tell you that this is a big deal, right? Because, you might have like a big artist, you put, a roadside billboard campaign, Spotify free tier adverts, radio adverts, social media adverts on various different platforms, right? Maybe you do some Google AdWords, right? Maybe you get a sync for the track in a popular TV show. There's all of these activities which are, of course, geared towards marketing. And then there's social media marketing, influencers and TikTok, and seeding out to these various accounts and all this kind of stuff. So there's all of these nebulous activities all driven towards one goal, which is get people to listen to the song on a paid service like Spotify, right? The problem there is that, they don't own any of those consumption funnels, right? If someone clicks something on Facebook and goes to Spotify and listens to the track, like, well, how did they get there, right? When did they listen to the track first? How many times have they listened to it subsequently? And also, did they see the roadside billboard beforehand? And then, because, there's this classic thing, if you need to see something 7 times before it beds in, it's like, well, how many of these marketing materials did they see before they decided to actually click and listen to the song or sign up to the pre-save or whatever it is? And we don't know, right? And that that's a problem, and I think that's something that AI is very, very well suited to solving. So that's an interesting use case. But like for me, you know, and I mentioned the kind of the accompaniment writing stuff, but for me, like the much more interesting thing is how AI can help creation in music. That's the most interesting thing. Like obviously there's writing, you know, I've already kind of discussed that a little bit, but then there's like there's other things like, you know, figuring out a style and finding like weird like crossovers that humans maybe wouldn't see. Like, could you have AI tell you or recommend to you artists to collaborate with, like, you know, like get a feature on from this artist, and right, like that you perhaps wouldn't have picked out, right? So that's like that's an interesting one, I think.
That would be good.
You know, and like the last few years, music has broken down language barriers, right? Like everyone's listening to like reggaeton in like London and listening to like US hip hop in like China. Like it's all kind of nuts, right? You know, in a way that that hadn't really happened before. Like those language barriers, the language of the lyrics are becoming less important as a success factor, right? And I think it'd be great if AI could figure out like, well, why did that happen for those, and then predict, you know, like early warning, like this track might do well in this territory even though it's a different language, and like predict those kinds of blocks. That right, exactly. That could be like an early warning system. That could be super interesting. I think like, but the big thing for creation for me is funding, right? Like, because if artists want to stay independent, like, you know, who's paying for the studio, who's paying for your time that you're, you know, not that you're working and not getting paid and all of this sort of stuff. So it's like, you know, obviously at SonX we're very focused on sustainable revenue for artists. That's kind of our like raison d'etre, right? But it's like, what if AI could predict, you know, an artist's future SonX earnings, right, from very little data right at the start? It's like, well, if we could get that right, would we be able to pay the artist in advance on their future earnings to enable them to create their art, right? You know, like that's like, these are much more exciting use cases for AI. I think, you know, the conversation is always going to be centered around rights, because the people with larger access to media are the big companies.
And this is definitely stuff that's like, and this is not like, you don't hear about that in the news
of course, but it's like any kind of news, isn't it? I think, but the real magic, I think, happens when you start to combine these things, right? So if you had like, okay, well, you know, we can figure out which fans are going to like this artist before, you know, they're not big yet, but we can figure out which fans can make them big, like which fans are the key players that can kind of tip an artist, right, in different territories. And then, you know, is this artist going to get big? Can we safely advance them money? You know, like, and then helping them like with the creation process in terms of like writing accompaniments and things like that. I think like if you started to combine all of those services, you kind of have this like AI turnkey to a career, which I think is like, that's a lot more exciting than arguing about, you know, should Drake get paid for that fake Drake song, right? Like that's not an interesting conversation for me.
Because I imagine that's also like such a problem within the industry, is sort of the payment to the artist being so much later. Because
absolutely. I mean, this is why record labels exist. They are, you know, I don't want to say like there's that classic cynic thing of like record labels are just banks, and it's like, I understand that point of view. Like there is a lot more work going on than people realize there, but you know, if an artist is doing well independently, the only reason that they would sign with a major label is because they need funding for creation, right? And it's like, well, why is that? I'm not saying that that's the wrong option. I'm just saying, why is it the only option, right? There should be others.
So there's more pros for it. There's more pros for it empowering musicians and
exactly. I think that's something we've always been conscious of with SonX, is like, we don't want to tread on anyone's toes. We don't want to like break anything. We want to be we want to add value where there wasn't any, rather than like replacing someone else's, you know, eating off someone else's plate kind of thing.
So with SonX, what's your next sort of big goal? Yours and Leah's, what's your next sort of big goal with SonX?
You know, like, we launched a few weeks ago. So, you know, we're currently in that kind of like, you know, iterating, optimizing kind of phase, right? Like making those little changes to what you've built. But I think, you know, at the same time, we're still innovating. I think a big one for us is community and communication. So like adding value where, you know, like being able to access the artist like never before, but in a way that's manageable for the artist, so we're not sucking up all of their time. You know, getting that right is a big focus for us. And another one is, you know, what Lee always calls bringing the URL to IRL, right? Like, because it's a digital platform where it's like, make it real, like bring it into real life. So, you know, we're
Oh, I
already
love
talking
that.
to well, we already have lined up like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some festival partnerships, and we're talking to others, and looking at real world activations and things like that. So that's very cool. And organising in person artist experiences,
Nice.
which which I mentioned previously, but I think that's
Hmm.
a big one, because that's kind of the missing thing with all this digital interaction. You
Yeah.
don't get to kind of actually spend face time with the artist, and I think that's the kind of the biggest payoff that you can get as a fan, is being able to sit down with an artist and like talk to them, right, as like a human.
Yeah, that's definitely like it's become, especially in this like tech-driven world, in-person, meaningful experiences are definitely like super high
Absolutely,
value now, and I
absolutely.
think
And
it's
then
only going to
the other
be
one I think
more
is
so in
like,
the future.
to use a horrible, horrible
Hmm.
buzzword that's flying around at the moment, glocalization, which is basic, right, which is like
Ooh, I what is that? I
localizing a
haven't heard
product
I know
globally. So
globalization,
like
but
making it work in
glocalization.
like loads of different territories, right? So it's, you're being specific about this territory and that territory and that territory. So you're kind of, doing that all at once. And for
Got
us,
it.
what that looks like is, translating the app into other languages. At the moment, it's only
Hmm.
available in English. And also looking at, our pricing structure and the relative kind of,
Hmm.
earning environment, if I can call it that, of each different territory. Like, what you charge a user in the US
Hmm.
or the UK might be different to what you charge a user in, West Africa or Latin America, right? Because their access to funds is very, very different. And then also on that
Yeah.
point, like their access to banking is different. So, let's look at how the payments are
Hmm.
made. So yeah, like those things, I think, and then figuring out talent in other
Hmm.
strategies as well, in other territories as well. Sorry, is part of the strategy. It's like, who if we're going to launch in Latin America, like, what artists do we want on the platform to do that? It's not the artists that we've got on the platform at the moment, right? Not yet anyway. But yeah,
Hmm.
so those are um, our kind
Hmm.
of immediate concerns. But like
Hmm.
we're always innovating, so there's a lot of much broader discussions. I think we're going to be doing some very
Yeah.
interesting visual things with the collectibles that fans can receive. But I'm not going to get into the weeds on that one at the moment. They have to wait and see.
Oh,
Yeah.
spoiler. They have to wait and see. You mentioned festivals earlier and British
Massively.
person,
Do you know
British
what? Like that's
person.
one of the
Do you
biggest
miss
thing.
going to
Like,
British
we're
festivals?
me and my girlfriend were moving to well, it's either going to be Barcelona or Mallorca, but I think it'll be Barcelona. But you know, that's one of the biggest things that I miss is the kind of the
Mm.
cultural offering that you get in Europe. And I think a lot of Europeans take that for granted until they don't live in Europe anymore, and then they realize how good they've got it. Like the number of festivals, the number of shows, especially if you live in a major city. Like in London, the amount of, because I spent most of my adult life in London, the amount of live music, for example, that you have on across the various
Mm.
different venues across the city any night of the week, even a Sunday, a Tuesday, it doesn't matter, right? The amount of quality live music that you would fill any festival, an entire weekend, and you have every single night you have that. And
Mm.
it's yeah,
Yeah, I mean it's definitely one of the things I missed so much in Asia when I was there, was just that kind of every single night. I mean, obviously in Bangkok and the big cities like that, obviously you have a bit more of that. But I do miss like that, and sort of like the even in the small cities in the UK, like Bristol, you can still go out on
absolutely.
any
And
night of the week
an
and
interesting
get find
stat as well, there's
music
actually
at somewhere
more
like
festivals, like
which is
outdoor festivals in the UK than there are in the whole of North America. Yeah.
hmm.
Yeah, we're mad about festivals in the UK.
Oh, really?
Well, right, but it's
Seriously?
like, but I
That's
think
kind of messed up because our
I
weather.
think it's because of the weather. Because it's as
That's
soon
kind
as
of
it
messed
hits
up because our
15
weather's
degrees, right,
so
everyone's out
bad.
there in like a vest and shorts and flip flops and undercooking meat and
Oh
but
God.
I think because the weather's so bad that
Yeah.
when summer comes we really celebrate it. But like festivals are obviously not a uniquely British phenomenon, but we're absolutely mad about them, and I think
Yeah.
it's I definitely miss that.
Yeah, and we go out in like the rain. We go out any weather as well. Like I've been at festivals where it's just been like pouring down with rain.
I
I've
mean,
literally
that's the
got
thing
wet
about
hair,
like,
but I'm
I
just
mean, you'll
there
know this as
like
well, right? Like from when we were in Playa del Carmen,
having a
but
great
like
little
Cancun,
time.
Playa del Carmen, like as soon as it rains, everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm not going out. Like even to the point
Mm.
where like, so okay, like for people that haven't been to
Duh.
Mexico, so there are, yeah, well,
Cancel
right, but
town.
like, but there are two apps called
It's your
Rappi
first
and
day?
Didi, which
No.
are like food delivery apps. So think like Deliveroo or DoorDash if you're in the States, right? As soon as it starts raining, all the restaurants
Hmm.
close.
Yeah.
Because they won't deliver because the riders won't go out. Like it's that crazy, right? In the UK, it'd be like, oh, it's raining, who cares? The
Yeah.
best the best for that is Ireland. I remember being in Kerry in Southwest Ireland, and it rains, and like people don't even blink. They don't run. They don't put up an umbrella. They don't put on a coat. They just walk as if it's not rain. Like you think you're crazy. You're like, am I the only one that sees that it's raining? Yeah, they're just like impervious to it. It's quite impressive. Oh yeah,
I love like all the different words we have for rain as well. We've got like spitting.
The
rain that get the rain that gets you wet.
Yeah, it's raining cats and dogs. It's the other one. It's like, but that doesn't even make sense. That doesn't. It's absolutely pouring down. It's belting down. It's teeming. Like there is no other language in the world, or no other country in the world that has so many like colloquialisms for rain. But or just the weather in general, probably. I don't know.
Yeah. And just in general, like even on this, you've said like a few, which I think like I think British people will know that tarting up is just like a really like normal way of saying you've dressed up. But I think maybe like in America,
this is the other thing you've got to watch out for as a digital nomad is cross-border linguistics, right? Like how something could be perceived in one country and it's completely different in another, right? It's
I have it's funny because my boyfriend's American, American Ukrainian, but American accent, and same language, so many language barriers. Like I say, he doesn't understand me. I say something, he doesn't understand it.
Yeah, it can be very it can be a slippery slope if you get it wrong. But anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So to kind of wrap up this interview, I want to know, what are your 5 lonely island discs? Imagine in a world where AI.
I love that in a world where AIs are taking over, they send me. They're like, oh, he's a programmer. He can break AI. Send him to a desert island, but give him a stereo and 5 CDs. Like that's Thank you, AI.
Excel him. So you only have 5 CDs or 5 singles.
I'm going to be a bit naughty, and I'm going to do 5 of each. So the absolute number one is for albums is Astral Weeks by Van Morrison, because it's just the best album ever written. It's absolutely like, and I think especially in the context of a desert island, right? Because there's no situation so bad that album can't make you feel better. It's just an absolutely beautiful album, I think. And then kind of for a similar reason, but also it's just like it's a lot more joyous and a lot less weird. But Ray Charles's first album, which I think was self-titled, it just has so many of his great songs on it. He just got like right out the gate. But he's like a lot more upbeat, and he just has such a beautiful voice. I think again it would kind of cheer you up, wouldn't it? And then Rumours by Fleetwood Mac, brilliant. It's a classic. Like you can't. I think like I get disappointed any time there's a desert island disc and someone doesn't include that album, because I don't think I've ever mentioned that album and heard someone not say, yeah, it's amazing. Like every single person thinks that album is amazing. Like how is that not on your desert island disc? That's it. Undisputed. I think Because the Internet by Childish Gambino, just a weird and wonderful album. And then also another weird and wonderful album, but it's like I think it's probably the second or third favorite album of all time. And I always get so much stick when I say this, and put it in that bracket. But Panic Prevention by Jamie T. It's just such a fucking incredible. See, that's the reaction that I normally get. It's an incredible album. It's such an see, it always happens without fail. That will happen rolling in the aisles. I should just do stand up. That's just that line, and then drop the mic. But no, I'm absolutely serious. It's such a brilliant album. I think it's so ahead of its time. And I can still listen to it back to back now. I think that album's now like 15 years old, or yeah. And this is the thing, right? And that's what comes into everyone's head when you say that album. But like that for me is like I can't believe that was the lead single, because that for me is the weakest track on the album. It's so good. It's so good. But the concept of it's so amazing as well, because it was like he was because he used to have like panic attacks. I think he still does, like have like panic attacks and anxiety. And he had this tape, this like self-help like anxiety tape, and he kind of like rolled bits of it into the album, and it was like it's so like weird, and it's like completely off the wall. Like it's yeah, like a lot of it I think is just made up. But yeah, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I think it's soundtracked as like you know when a song or an album soundtracks like a certain part of your life like perfectly. I think it just did that, and that's why I'm so like fucking fixated on it. But yeah, it's a great album. And then I think for singles, and these, I think most of these are probably going to be a lot newer, because I think albums take a long time to kind of seep into your psyche, don't they? Whereas singles just kind of get you straight away. So one song that I've just listened to incessantly and have done for the last couple of years is Helen Back by Bakar. It's just like a really kind of like chilled out, mellow, summery kind of thing. He name checks Portobello Road, so obviously, you know, big ups. But yeah, great. Oh, actually, okay, no, this isn't the new one, but this is like a it's a karaoke classic, I think, for me anyway. Roadhouse Blues by The Doors. Again, just a fucking brilliant song. Such a great song.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Any Doors song is
like
just
I need
so
like you can say the same about like Led Zeppelin as well. I nearly put Led Zeppelin 4 in my album list, but like Jamie T beat out Led Zeppelin to the fifth spot, which I think is kind of a weird thing to say, but there we are. It's fine. I'm completely, I have no shame whatsoever. Venezuela Rhythm by Hack Baker. That's an absolutely great song. And Hack Baker, by the way, he's so good and showed so much potential. Like I still think he's one of my favorite new artists. But it's like that song was the first one of his that I heard, and it's so different from like everything else that he's done. I'm like, oh God, why can't you just do more of that? Which obviously is an incredibly selfish way to look at art, but like it's such a great song. 10% by Kate Renata, just a banger, just an absolute banger. And then Tombstone Blues by Bob Dylan, because it's just the lyricism in that song is just unbelievable. And that's my 10. That's.
That sounds
like yeah. I mean, if I was on a desert island with those discs, I don't think I'd be mad about it. Like as long as there's food and water, I don't think I'd be mad about it at all.
No.
Okay.
So last question. We sent you a Nexstand, and I know that you have got a bit of a bad office setup at the moment in Mallorca, or at least that's what
it's great. I mean, it's like obviously for traveling, it's really good. It's like you mentioned the carbon fiber one. Is that this? I didn't read any of the bumps that came with it, but yeah, like it's super light anyway, and it folds up like tiny. Which is, you know, like you can just pop it in like the side pocket of a bag or something. It's super cool. But like it took me a minute to figure out how to like adjust it. But when I did, I was like, wow, this is like, you can have it super high. Like I can put it on the breakfast bar and put it on its highest setting, and it's a standing desk, right? Like without having this weird like hydraulics or whatever. But then you can put it down and put it on the table, and it's just a normal thing. So it's very, very useful. I think. What's interesting, I think, like the whole posture thing is incredibly important now, especially for digital nomads, because you don't necessarily have control over your workspace anymore. You're going to be living in various different places, and I think anything that can help with that is super important. Yeah, because like when you're in an office, you know, especially if you're at a big company, they've got kind of like huge desks and ergonomic chairs, and you know, get me a wrist support, and you know they'll sort you one out, and you know whatever, and they'll get you a little fan for your desk, and you have all this kind of control over this little station that you set at every day. And like for digital nomads, you know, I mean, on balance, like being a digital nomad, you know, I much prefer like you know the travel and all the rest of it, but there has to be a balance where you have some way of kind of taking care of your own spine. So yeah, this.
Yeah, it's definitely like one of the struggles of sourcing Airbnbs as well, because you need to like obviously make sure there's a workspace, and then if there isn't, you have to pay for a co-working, and the chairs are never. I mean, I can't remember the last time I sat in an ergonomic chair, for instance.
Well, this is it, and I find like that there's three things there with completely conflicting priorities, right? Because you've got an Airbnb, the priority is to maximize the sleeping space, because that's how you can charge more for the apartment, right? So offices kind of fall by the wayside, right? So then, okay, well, I'll go to a coffee shop, and it's like, well, they're priority is aesthetics. So you get these kind of like pine and metal school chairs that are like super bad for your back. You know, I can't spend 8 hours sitting in that. You know, so it's like, yeah, like something's got to give. And I think this is a good way to kind of alleviate that problem for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Well,
Likewise.
that is now coming to the end of our interview, and it's been so nice chatting with you. And we had like a bit of a catch up before as well. So that's actually, I think like I need to apologize. I was like a few minutes late because me and Lewis were just
Yeah, it was good. It's great to
catching
see
up beforehand. But yeah, it's been so good talking to you, and I hope that everyone got some really good value out of this as well. So it's at
it's on
sonx.x.app, or is
Instagram.
it at
It's at
sonxx.app?
SonX, which is SONX.app. On Twitter, it's just at SonX, SONX, and the website is sonx.com. And also, you can search on the App Store. This is the one thing that I want everyone to do: search on the App Store for SonX, SONX, on both Play Store and Apple App Store.
Sounds good. Okay, well, thank you so much, Lewis, and thank you everyone else for coming to join.
Take care.
And
Cheers, Nicole.
catch you up.